I would like to start today with a market update, basically giving my analysis of where we stand in terms of the market cycle, the economy, and then I'm going to move into talking about a particular position that I have in crypto, and then we'll end with a personal finance note. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah Ali. Or is it alim? One of the two. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So let's talk about the macro environment. So obviously there are, I guess, two main things that people are worried about. Inflation, the war in Ukraine with Russia, and an extension to inflation would be the monetary policy that will accompany battling inflation and perhaps the economic contraction slowdown that is set to take effect. Now, I'm going to focus on this last point, which is the economic recession that everyone has been predicting will happen for the longest time, but has yet to really manifest. And people are starting to think, hey, is this coming anytime? Are we possibly going to avoid a recession this time around? Is it going to be a case of a soft landing, the much searched for but has eluded previous economies so frequently? The soft landing, is it possible that we could get it this time around? Well, let's look at economic data as it stands today and how I think this economic data, if we wanted to predict what a snapshot of this same data would look 6 months from now, based on my assessment, will be. So let's start with where we are today. So where we are today is that, especially in the US, so my analysis will focus on the US, but US GDP growth is quite robust. It's the highest it's been since last year, since December of last year. And this comes at a time when even the Fed was predicting a recession to have happened by now this year. And now the Fed has pivoted and said, well, actually, maybe a recession is not going to come. Household balance sheets are holding near record levels of cash. Companies are holding near record levels of cash. Earnings have been quite strong this earnings season. Private sector income and wealth accumulation has outpaced inflation. And typically we see inflation drop off when a recession commences. But this time around, we've seen inflation starting to drop off way before any signs of a recession. So we are in a really strong spot from an economic perspective, and even the markets have reflected this from the start of the year. I'm sure many of your portfolios have done quite well. And this was really not what was expected. Now, I should say that I think the lagging effects of interest rate hikes have yet to really hit the economy. And I think that perhaps this time around, the lag is longer than usual, because the US economy in particular is very service oriented. It's not manufacturing oriented. And manufacturing tends to be a lot more volatile than services do. And manufacturing tends to reflect tougher monetary conditions a lot quicker than services do. So this is one explanation for why the US economy has been as resilient as it has been so far this year. That said, in no time in history has the amount of monetary tightening happened with a recession not following. It just hasn't happened before. And therefore, I think that even though the gap between the monetary tightening and the recession is perhaps longer now than it has been in previous history, the relationship will still hold. That is, I think you can expect a recession to be upcoming. Probably, if I had to guess, Q4 of 2023 or maybe Q1 of 2024. Now, in terms of our stock positions, what do I think about those? How am I strategizing about those? My assessment is the following. Given the strength of the economy right now, I think there's probably a bit more juice left in the recent bull rally. I think there's a bit more juice left, and perhaps the S&P sees a new high. But I think if this materializes and the S&P does indeed see a new high, I think it's probably a good idea, and again, this is not investment advice, disclaimer, all of that good stuff. I think it's probably a good idea to take a lot of risk exposure off of the table at that point. Because as I said, we're probably due for a recession at the end of this year or the beginning of next year, and with that, probably a pullback in equities. Now, do I know for certain? Of course I don't. No one knows for certain. As I mentioned earlier, the Fed thought that a recession was coming, and then it changed its mind. So if a authority with as much privileged information as the Fed doesn't know what's coming around the corner, for certain, I certainly don't either. But I think it's probable that the relationships that we've seen in history hold moving forward, and that means a recession is upcoming. Not in the next 2 months, not in the next 3 months, but perhaps towards the end of the year, perhaps in the beginning of 2024. So that's my analysis of the sort of macroeconomy. As it relates to a specific position, which I do want to share, specific positions with you, and not just talk about generalities, but this time in crypto. I do see a increased movement in whales buying this crypto. That is, transactions that are greater than $100,000, that are worth more than $100,000 happening with this crypto. And I think a confluence of factors are coming together here. At the top of these factors are the obvious endorsement or the support that this crypto has from one of the most influential figures on earth right now, Elon Musk. Number two, the growing popularity of Elon Musk's previously Twitter, now X. I believe it's close to 500 million daily active users now, which is a record for this app. And this makes the possibility, although we have no details about what this integration will look like, but it makes the possibility of an integration have an expected value that is higher and higher the more daily active users this social media platform is able to attract. Now think of it this way. Bitcoin, depending on who you ask, has between, let's say, 200 and 300 million people that are actively using it. If you had a situation where there was some preference for Dogecoin on a platform that has 500 million people using it daily. Then all of a sudden, you have a network that is, at least in terms of head count, comparable to the size of the Bitcoin network. Even if, this doesn't mean that, 2 out of 5 or 3 out of 5 Twitter users are going to ultimately use Dogecoin, but at least they'll be sort of one step closer to using it than they otherwise were. And therefore, the possibility of appreciation for this token seems to be not trivial, especially when you compare the market caps of these two competing tokens or cryptocurrencies. So the market cap, so the total value of all the Dogecoins that are out there in existence is close to 10 billion, whereas the total value of all the Bitcoins that are out in existence is close to 500 billion. So you can see that any sort of catching up that Dogecoin could do to Bitcoin, you can see how much potential in terms of appreciation this token has. And that's why I think we've seen increased activity in whales in this particular token. This is not to say that this is, necessarily something that's going to happen, but it does seem to me like a plausible scenario. It seems like something that could possibly happen. And then when you look a layer deeper into the particulars of each cryptocurrency, I would say Bitcoin has an advantage over Dogecoin in one key area, which is an important area, which is that the distribution of Bitcoin is not as concentrated as the distribution of Dogecoin, although the distribution of Bitcoin is quite complicated, quite concentrated compared to even fiat currencies. But Dogecoin is more concentrated in terms of its distribution. However, I think that it's possible for this to get remedied on account that Dogecoin, there is 5 billion new tokens that enter into circulation every year. So now some people think that this is bad for the token because there's no limit like Bitcoin. Bitcoin has 21 million token limit. There's never going to be more than that. But Dogecoin is set to introduce 5 billion new tokens every year. So within a certain period of time, there is a limit, right, to the number of Dogecoins that can be printed. But over an infinite time scale, then there is no limit. But I think this may be advantageous because the new issuance of tokens can help with increasing the distribution of this token. I also think it's helpful from a utility perspective because it's not a deflationary token. It's not meant to always increase in price like Bitcoin is. Therefore, Bitcoin is a solid store of value, but perhaps it won't be used as much in terms of day-to-day transactions as something like Dogecoin would be, because it's not meant to increase in value all the time, and people don't want to spend things that are meant to increase in value all the time like Bitcoin. So Dogecoin, with its steady and decreasing inflation rate, has an advantage in that respect. The other advantages that Dogecoin has when compared to Bitcoin is the faster transaction times, lower transaction fees. And I also think, yes, there is the Lightning Network that is being built on Bitcoin. But if I were to guess in terms of development, I'd much rather, if we want to talk about layer 2 solutions, so solutions that can be built on top of the original blockchain, like a Lightning Network, then as a developer, I would rather start with a layer 1 that is faster with less transaction fees and develop that than I would with a a platform that was less fast, more expensive. So that's really the case for Dogecoin. Obviously, PIF members know that I'm heavily invested in this token. Whether this thesis plays out, I don't know. Obviously, الغيب لا يعلمه إلا الله. But I think for the reasons I mentioned that it's a plausible scenario, and that's why I have the allocation that I have in this particular cryptocurrency. The third part of this live, which I want to bring up, is sort of a personal finance, a personal finance sort of tidbit, because I think it's important for people to realize. And I posted this on Twitter, and but I'll mention it here as well. So a lot of people ask me, I don't have much to invest. They'll tell me, they have, I've heard like $200, $300, something like that. And they want to know how to invest that small amount of money. And my answer to them is that if you're trying to invest a small amount of money into something like stocks or real estate or crypto or some other asset class, it's pretty much a waste of time. The only investment that you should be worried about when you have a small number is investing in yourself, increasing your income earning potential. That's the best investment that you can make. And I gave some numbers to support this. Let's say you have $1,000 to invest, right? And let's say you invest in the stock market and you average annually 10%. You average annually 10% over a 10-year period, which is not bad actually, which is like you did better than half of the people in the market at least. So after 10 years, you would end up with $2,500, roughly $2,500. So you doubled in a half. So times 1.5, your initial investment is what you ended up with. And then, so that's $2,500 when you invested in stocks. Let's say you invest in real estate, and on average, let's say you got 8% average annual return, which is again better than half of people that end up investing in real estate. After 10 years, you would end up with around $2,100, right? So $2,500 with stocks, $2,100 with real estate after investing $1,000 for 10 years. Now, alternatively, let's say you bought a course or you went through some training for that $1,000 in, let's say, data analytics or something like that. And this training ended up increasing your income by $12,000 per year. Like with the data analytics certificate, and there's a lot of great certificates online, some of them for free, that are given from really reputable organizations. Google has a lot of courses online. Some of them are free, some of them have costs to them, but again, a lot of them are accessible within that $1,000 that we're starting with. So let's assume you increased your income by $12,000 per year. Well, after 10 years, so the same comparison time, after 10 years, you have $120,000 as a return on your investment of that $1,000. So $120,000 when you invested in yourself after 10 years versus $2,500 when you invested in stocks versus $2,100 when you invested in real estate. So, and this is why I said it was basically a waste of time if you were trying to invest a really low number and trying to, and with the aim of making money from that. That's basically a waste of time. The best way for you to earn money from a small amount, investing a small amount, is through enhancing your own skill sets. So yeah, with that, I'm going to, because I mentioned in the ad, if you have any questions, or in the announcement rather, in the announcement for this live that if you have any questions, bring them to the live. So let's see if you have any questions. If you have any questions, put them in the chat and I'll be happy to answer. Or if you want me to talk about anything. Wa alaikum salam to everybody. Someone was asking about Ethereum, so let me talk very quickly about Ethereum. I'm not really, Ethereum as a platform for smart contracts, and I recently did, a podcast where people were asking me about, smart contracts, and I told them, listen, I'm still not really grasping the usefulness of smart contracts. Like, why would, because the wrinkle that smart contracts introduce is that there's no third party, which means that when you're interacting with someone, if there's any sort of dispute, any sort of problem, any sort of thing that didn't go as you intended, something you didn't think through well enough, there's no third party to go to solve this problem for you. There's no one that can be the arbiter of truth. There's no one who can solve the issue. And that seems to me like a step backwards, not a step forward. People came up with the idea of having a third party intermediary for. Sorry, I think we may have lost connection for a second there. Okay, I think we're back, hopefully. So as I was saying, and Ethereum as a platform for smart contracts, one would assume is going to get a lot of its value from the use of smart contracts on its platform. And I just don't see that bright a future for smart contracts in their current implementation. Now, perhaps someone comes up with a utility for smart contracts that has not been implemented yet, and they become relevant. As of now, I haven't seen that, and therefore it's hard for me to invest in a smart contract platform. And I honestly haven't met anyone who has used smart contracts, even the biggest believers in smart contracts. I haven't met anyone who has used smart contracts in a practical way. Like, oh, I needed this thing done, and there was no other solution other than a smart contract that could do it for me, and that's why I used it. I haven't heard this statement yet. And I invest based on utility. I always like to say tawasaw bil haqq. What's the truth? What's the truth of the matter? Not hype, what's the truth of the matter? Is there benefit here? And I haven't seen it yet in smart contracts. It often seems to me like an over-engineered solution, and whatever problem they're trying to solve could have been solved a lot quicker. Could you please reevaluate Islamic funds? Absolutely, I can, inshallah. Absolutely, that's a good. Is Binance a good place to invest? I wouldn't touch Binance. I don't like the fact that it doesn't seem to be regulated by a reputable source. We saw that what happened to FTX. There's no reason why the same couldn't happen to Binance, to be honest. So I wouldn't touch Binance. What would be a good way of learning basics of accounting and finance for stock valuations? Well, here's the plug. We start our first live session for our course, Master Halal Investing, tomorrow, inshallah. So if you're interested in learning halal investing, then I would highly recommend it. Salam, brother. Can you highlight about the halal aspect of dropshipping? That's kind of a different subject. I would like to stay focused on the stock market, perhaps in a different live session. Is there any halal fund that is investing in AI? Well, I will tell you that I think AI is, well, first of all, if you compare it to this, like the hype around AI is much more justified than the hype around Web3, for example. I think the hype around Web3 turned out to be not really well placed. But I think AI is going to play a big role in our futures, and perhaps it ushers in an age of abundance. And that's why I mentioned in a few videos back that don't take these opportunities to give to charity, sadaqah, and zakat for granted, because it's conceivable that AI ushers in an age where recipients of sadaqah and zakat are very, like, eligible recipients are hard to find. Even though this seems very far-fetched today, I can see a scenario where this happens. I do think AI will play a very important role in our future. And I think, to be honest, perhaps one of the biggest names in AI that is kind of not associated with AI as much as it should be is Tesla. Because I think that, and Elon Musk said this, I think it's far easier for Tesla engineers who are working on self-driving and the complications with that and how far along they've gone with that. It's far easier for those set of engineers to engineer something like a chat GPT than it would be for the other way around, for the engineers of chat GPT to figure out full self-driving. So I think that Tesla is probably ahead of any other company in terms of artificial intelligence. And then when you look at their going into robotics and the development that they're making there, if you marry robotics with artificial intelligence, I think you end up with a lot of pretty awesome possibilities. Some are concerning, but some pretty beneficial. You could see a case where a lot of the manual labor that people dread doing nowadays and causes a lot of injuries, a lot of health problems. Those issues solved with a robot that has sufficiently advanced artificial intelligence. So I think something like a Tesla would be a good addition for someone who believes in AI. I also think that NVIDIA, which is a company that has benefited a lot from the hype around AI because of the anticipated demand for their chips, is perhaps getting in the it may experience a pullback, and I'll tell you why. People are suspecting that these companies are going to build AI sort of on premise, and there's going to be this demand for AI chips that NVIDIA provides, and they're extrapolating this demand into the future and what earnings come from that, and then working backwards and coming up with this lofty valuation. But I think that the demand for chips may be a lot less if artificial intelligence is delivered as a service. So you have, 4 or 5 players that are main players that have artificial intelligence, and they sell access to their artificial intelligence to all the other companies, sort of like software as a service. So I think that perhaps a lot of people that are looking into some of these names have overvalued them. Assalamu alaikum, alaikum salam. Hope you're doing well. Alhamdulillah, thank you. How can we as Europeans invest in Sharia compliant ETFs such as Wahid or others? Are the PIF portfolio available on European trading apps such as Trading 212? Yeah, so PIF companies are available. I mean, we mostly invest in companies that are trading on the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. So US-based companies, I do plan on adding an international portfolio, but we have been focused on US-based or companies that are trading on US exchanges, just because of the regulatory regime there being sort of tried and tested over many years, and something that we can really depend on when we're looking at the financials quarterly. But yeah, so to answer your question, so long as you have access, I'm pretty sure most major brokers have access to stocks that are traded on the US market. So long as you have something like that accessible to you in your country, then you're able to invest in PIF companies. If a loved family member who is stubbornly tech incompetent asks you to trade their account on their behalf, would you? That's a good question, actually. Um, are they providing the trades, or are are you trading for them? I would say, you have to be careful. Obviously, doing business with family members, your number one priority is not to sever your tie with your family member. You don't want قطيعة الرحم obviously is something that you want to avoid. So if the situation invites conflict, then structure the situation so that it doesn't. So maybe you could trade on their behalf if they're tech incompetent, but first of all, try not to tell them they're tech incompetent or describe them as such in their presence. But if they tell you the trades and all you do is execute them, then I guess that would be one way where you couldn't be blamed. Whatever happens, I would just sort of a word of caution that you know, especially for the uninitiated, if you're investing in something and it goes down, they may feel if they're unfamiliar with the nature of the markets, they may feel that you did them wrong or something. So you want to be careful there. I have some money in Binance. Where do you recommend I take it? Well, I would put it in a wallet. So a cold storage wallet or a hot storage wallet, that's fine. But I would not keep the money on the exchange. Remember what happened to FTX? You don't want to expose yourself to that. So if you have tokens on Binance, take it off of Binance, put it in cold storage or hot storage. What is a good book to get started in Islamic finance, English or Arabic? Well, I hate to plug my course again, but associated with the course is I wouldn't call it a book, but PDFs that you can read. So I would look into that. Salam, brother. BTC analysis on long run, weekly and monthly. Yeah, I try to stay away from. I think weekly is too short of analysis. Monthly is even a short of analysis. But I think that there's a number of catalysts for Bitcoin right now. You have the upcoming halving. You have the ETF, which BlackRock applied to, and others, Grayscale has applied to, and it's now in court. So you have attempts at an ETF. And then if you look at the sort of Bitcoin cycle and you extrapolate from that, I think it's not a stretch to say that we're sort of at a local low, and perhaps now is a good time to get in. That said, I would point out two things. Number one, you saw the Litecoin halving. That didn't work out that well, right? So with Litecoin, the halving happened and there was no appreciation in price. There was a bit of appreciation maybe 2 weeks before it, but it quickly retraced. Number two, now this is not necessarily the case with Bitcoin. Number two, I don't think a Bitcoin halving has happened historically ever when interest rates were as high as they are right now. So how this plays out in terms of the appreciation that Bitcoin actually experiences is anyone's guess. I do think that there will be a run for Bitcoin, but how high it gets to is really hard to say. I think it's not unreasonable to suspect, something between 60 and 100,000 within 12 to 18 months. I think that's a reasonable range if I had to guess. Seems overpriced. Such as Microsoft and AWS. Yes, definitely. NVIDIA is a solid company. I'm just not sure about the valuation right now, to be honest. That said, I would also add this one thing about NVIDIA, which is that it does have substantial exposure to China. And so, in case there's an invasion of Taiwan by China, that could be catastrophic for the company. All right, so that looks like the main questions. Thank you all for tuning in. If you did like this style of video where I'm kind of chatting along with you, then leave a comment, let me know, and that would be really appreciated. It helps with the video's visibility again as well. Also, if you'd like, maybe next time we can take calls. And we'll see how that works. If there's enough demand for it, perhaps we can take calls and people can tell me about different they have, and perhaps get my opinion on them. If you're interested in something like that, leave it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. All right, thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Assalamu alaikum, and peace be upon you all.